Can you tell me your name?
My name is Milo.
What pronouns do you use?
I use they, them pronouns.
Slay. Do you have any connections to Girl Scouts?
I actually do. Um, Very small ones. I think I got it to a brownie, almost a junior, and then my troop got so small it disbanded, and I
Hmm,
never had an opportunity to join again.
that's kind of sad.
Yeah, I wish I did.
I know you're still in school, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You're high school?
Yeah, I'm a senior.
Oh my gosh. You're growing up so much.
I know.
Do you do anything for work?
I do. I work at a church as I do their childcare on Sundays for it's 4 hours and I love it.
What are some other things you like to do with your time?
I love watching Grey's Anatomy. It's my favorite. And I make bracelets and sometimes I do art. Oh, and I blog.
Yes. I love your blog so much, honestly.
Thank you.
I'm going to start by talking about community. So, what does the word community mean to you?
So, community for me is anything where people come together and support each other and love each other.
I love that. Do you think a lot of communities face different barriers?
Absolutely. I think, and they face different barriers too. So, the LGBTQ community might face a different barrier than the disability community, but they all face barriers.
What communities are you a part of right now?
As of the moment, I am someone who is LGBTQ. I identify as lesbian and non-binary, and I have a disability. And I'm a creative person. I think that's a community. Also, something I don't talk about as much is I have survived some different types of abuse, and I think that is a very strong community that people don't often think about.
Very true, honestly. Do you interact with a lot of different people online or more in person?
I do both. I will say a lot of the disability community that I interact with is online. Um, but I am starting to interact with more and more people in person, and I'm so happy about that.
What are some strengths in some of the communities you're in?
I would say that the disability community, although they will sometimes, we have some infighting sometimes, we support each other so much. We really do. Especially mutual aid campaigns and different protests. We know how to organize.
Very true. What are some weaknesses in some communities that you're in?
I think in all communities there can be infighting. Infighting is when a community fights about something that is a mutual concept between most people in that community. So whether it be terminology or just ideas on a specific issue, um, there can be some arguments about that. So I think every community deals with that. I think something that's specific to the LGBTQ community is conflicting identities and the definitions of those identities. So, like previously, I mentioned that I identify as a lesbian and non binary. And some people can really think that lesbian really only means a woman loving a woman. And then other people think that it can mean a variety of things, like someone who just isn't a man loving someone who isn't a man. So there can be a lot of infighting about non-binary people being lesbians.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think especially because there are so many terms, and I feel like a lot of people, when it's part of their identity, they sometimes can hold on to that so tightly that they become less open-minded about it.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I can see how it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Something that I've learned about in a lot of my women's studies classes is intersectionality, which is kind of how all of our different identities impact one another and also how they interact with our communities, especially with discrimination and disadvantages or advantages. So, what are some different identities that you hold?
So, as like being disabled, LGBTQ, and a survivor of abuse, those all intersect very strongly. Both LGBTQ people and disabled people are highly like more at risk to be abused. So that's something that happens a lot, where these identities intersect a lot.
Have your identities changed a lot as you've grown up?
Absolutely. Um, I at first didn't really identify with a gender identity, mostly because, back when I was younger, that wasn't really a thing that was talked about. And it still isn't with
Mhm.
little kids a lot of the times. Um, so that has changed. I was born as a female, and I grew up around women centered things. So it has changed a lot, and there's still parts of my identity that I hold that are very much woman centered, being a lesbian. And also, I never had a label for my disability growing up until I was 14. So I didn't know I was disabled. So that has changed too.
Especially growing up, but even now, do a lot of the people in your life tend to label you or tend to label you in a way that doesn't necessarily align with your identities?
I would say so. And some of it's not intentional. Like, people, I present very feminine. So people I may just meet think that I am a woman. And I would never fault them for that. Um, but it is something. And when I was growing up too, I am neurodivergent. That's an identity I hold. And I was labeled weird a lot. And I've come to accept it. I wrote a blog post about it. Um, but that was a big label, and I first did not align with that. I didn't think I aligned with that. So it took time.
Have you ever had an experience where you felt like you had to hide part of your identity?
Absolutely, yeah. Being in the disability community, though, everybody is usually very accepting, in the chronic illness community sometimes, which can be separate communities.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of stigma around mental illness, and I've grown up with mental health problems. And sometimes I would, hide that part of me that is very, deep inside, because I didn't want to be seen as like, I'm just mentally ill, I'm not actually chronically ill, kind of thing. So that's something I've had to hide before.
What does chronic illness mean to you?
So there's a hard definition to it, and I can't think of it right now. Um, but to me, it means that I deal with medical problems that significantly impact my life and how I see the world.
Does this differ from how you view disability?
Sometimes. So, for example, I have heart arrhythmia. It's called long QT syndrome. It's not, some people can get it acquired from like SSRIs, antidepressants.
Hmm.
Mine is congenital, most likely. And I don't view that as a disability, because really I just go in for my EKGs, my heart rhythm like tests. So yeah, they can mean different things. For me, disability means I have something that impacts the way I navigate the world too.
I really appreciate that definition. How do you impact your community?
So I impact my community in a variety of ways. It can be through my advocacy, but it can also just be through like good deeds, kindness. Um, yeah, you don't have to be a huge advocate to impact your community. You can just kind of be a nice person, and make people's days brighter. So that's definitely some ways I impact my community.
I love that you mentioned that. I completely agree with it too. I think sometimes it gets overshadowed that if we don't have a big enough voice, we're not going to have any impact. And
Mhm.
obviously, that's not true because just being a good person can change so many other people.
Absolutely.
What's something that you would like to change about your communities?
I would love if we just listened to each other more, let each other finish speaking. And look, I get it. I have ADHD. I struggle with waiting my turn. So, yes, that can be hard. But if we just if we could just, finish speaking and then take it all in and accept criticism too.
What are some experiences that you've had with advocacy?
So I've done a couple things, as you know.
Hmm.
Um, but I'll start from the beginning. Um, when I was in the ninth grade 3 years ago, wow, um, I went to a traditional high school. And I had a chronic illness that I was working on getting treated, and that chronic illness is causing a disability. I had a disability that I was still working on kind of getting. I could not do physical education. I couldn't play those games. I couldn't run back and forth on the gymnasium. Not going to happen. And instead of just letting me sit out or giving me an alternative activity or putting me in the adaptive PE class, I was failed. I lost my credit and I had to redo it when I was finally given an adaptive PE class. I transferred out of that high school. Peace out. Not going to do that. But that really kickstarted everything. I was like, whoa, I can't let that happen to other people. And that's really what started it. So I joined an equity committee through my school district and I got involved with just accessibility issues around my school. Like people were using the elevators to vape. So I put a badge reader on the elevator. Well, I pushed to get someone to put a badge reader on the elevator and things like that. And then things got bigger. I started reaching out to people personally, people on the school board. And then I reached out to a state senator. um, I worked with the state senator to make Ehlers-Danlos syndrome awareness month in May. And what people frequently misunderstand about that is I did a joint resolution, which is an agreement between the state Senate and the state House. And that does not have to be renewed every year. Proclamations do. So this was voted on, this was written out, I helped write it, which was really cool. And then I was recognized. And then I took it further. I just kept going. I reached out to my school district and I was like, hey, can we do this here too? And they were all about it. And I'm so lucky, and I do acknowledge that privilege that I had a school district who was willing to do change with me, because many people don't have that. So then I was at a school board meeting and people were recognizing me, and then it was on Facebook and people were like, I feel so seen. And I was like, oh, this is why I do this. It was full circle.
Every single time that I would see something about all of the work you were doing, I was like cheering you on. I was like, yeah, I'm so proud of you. Of
Thank you.
course. Do you think that having had all of these experiences has changed you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When I was in the eighth grade, I had left the household I was in to live with my dad full time, who was amazing, by the way. Um, and I was a very different person back then. I did not know how to advocate for myself. I was very scared. And quite frankly, I wasn't getting the mental health treatment I needed. And since then, since getting treated and then doing all this advocacy, it has changed me. I stick up for myself now.
I think that advocacy is an important skill for everyone to have.
Absolutely. And I was chatting about this with someone else. Advocacy is an important skill for everybody to have, but not everybody has to be an advocate for a community. And not everybody should be pressured to do that. Advocacy itself is important because you need to be able to stand up for yourself and speak up for yourself.
Mhm.
When you see that you're not getting your needs met, nobody's going to meet those needs unless you speak up most of the time. Some people are very nice. Um, so yeah, that is extremely important. However, being an advocate for a community is a lot more work, and not everybody needs to do that. Not everybody has to do that. And if you want to do that, that's amazing. But you don't have to.
What does it look like to empower people around you?
I think it can look different for everyone, and it can look different in different communities. But I think the first step to empowering someone is listening to them and hearing their story. Because if they don't feel listened to, they're not going to want to tell it again. So that's the first step, in my opinion. And then after that, it's supporting them, cheering them on, coming to their stuff. It's like how parents, when they can, they should absolutely come to their kids' ballet recital. Like, it's so important for them to feel supported, or else they're not going to want to do it a lot of the time.
Playing on the idea of listening to others and really making them feel seen, how does empathy interact with community?
I think every community needs a level of empathy. I'm not saying, and I think there also is a skewed idea of what empathy is. Empathy doesn't mean that that person is right. Empathy means you see where they're coming from and you understand how they got to that point.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean they're right. Um, so I think every community needs a level of empathy, because if you don't have that, then everybody's going to be fighting with each other in some way because they don't understand each other.
How do you think we can have more responsible interactions with each other?
I know this is silly. Well, it's not silly. I know it's kind of a cliche. Think before you speak.
Very much.
Um, think before you type. Think before you speak. Would you be okay with someone you loved seeing that or hearing that? And I think that's really important. But also, responsibly interacting with each other means that you're not jumping to conclusions too.
Could you describe to me a little bit more about what you mean?
Yeah. So when you might hear, going back to like the conflicting identity thing, if you have one idea of what a lesbian is, one, you think it's a woman loving a woman, can't be anything else. But then you encounter me, um, you might be confused, but someone might jump to a conclusion and think that I am trying to devalue that label, which is not it.
Mm.
Now, that would be jumping to a conclusion, but instead maybe asking more questions and asking, what does that label mean to you? And then if maybe that person has a skewed idea of that label or had misinformation fed to them, and you can educate them, you can talk to them. So I guess, I mean, a lot of it comes down to just talk to each other.
Yeah. I think too, at least I've noticed this with certain identities, especially LGBTQ or chronic illness or disability, some people may feel uncomfortable talking about those. What are some ways that you've observed that people have handled those conversations really well versus kind of been more disrespectful about them?
Yeah. Oh, so I think the first step to getting someone to handle it well is just not talking about it in such a way where it's kind of hush hush.
Mm.
But even then, some people will not handle it well. Um, so some ways I've seen it handled well is talking to someone and they're like, "Tell me more," or "Can you explain this further?" and and then hearing their perspective on it, and then kind of gathering information and then putting together, I guess, an answer that they would understand. Ways I have not seen it well. Okay, so some people I've talked to when I was younger, when I first got diagnosed at 14, said something along the lines of, "Oh, I would die if I had that." Or, "Oh, I would if I had that." So that's not good.
No.
And and that comes from a lot of misinformation and stigma and ableist perspectives that might have been fed to them as a child or they gained through bad online spaces. But yeah, so those are some ways I haven't seen it handled well. And then the way you can grow from that is explaining that that's not the right answer. Because, look, there's so much nuance to everything, but sometimes they're all wrong answers.
Hmm.
And that would be one of them. So, kind of re educating if you have that energy. And if, worst comes to worst, don't talk to them anymore. You don't need that around you.
That is so real. Like, thank you for bringing up boundaries
Yeah, absolutely.
because we need boundaries to survive and thrive.
Yeah, and one of the boundaries too is you don't need to educate everyone on everything. It's not always your job, and that's okay. You can step back and be like, "Look, Google it."
Yes, absolutely. Tell me about a time that you felt seen.
Oh, okay. So I'm trying to think of one specific time, but the first thing that comes to my head, out of my mind, out of my mind is a book and a movie. I read the book first in like second grade, and it's an amazing book about this girl with cerebral palsy. And she was facing so many barriers to her education and to her access needs. So she gets something called a MediTalker, which is an AAC device. I don't actually know off the top of my head what AAC stands for. And the whole world is like, oh crap, she's really smart. And she wins this contest and she's just out of this world. So then the movie happens and I was like, oh my God, this is it. For me at least. Not everybody's gonna feel seen in that movie, but for me, they got so many aspects right from the handicap pass on the handicap placard on like the car window to the barriers to access at school to the peers making fun of her and the way she was treated. It was like, oh my God, this is this is what happened. And that was a lot. And then I think another time I felt seen recently was I went to this summit called Together We Thrive. I never shut up about this summit. I never stopped talking about this summit, okay? And it was all about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I met a significant amount of people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I mean, that's what this summit was about. It was kind of life-changing to see that many people who really understood my experience when we're sitting in this circle and talking about, crappy doctors' experiences and the good doctors and the this and the that. It was good. And I really felt like these people understood me.
That's so special.
Yeah.
I'm really, really happy that you were able to experience that because sometimes we just need that. I want to know a little bit more about your work with Stripes and Stride because I know you're very involved in that. So tell me more about that.
Yeah. So Stripes and Stride was started by a friend of mine, a friend of ours.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a nonprofit aimed at helping kids and teens with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and, making them feel seen and empowering them to advocate for themselves and really just helping their quality of life. So I am their outreach coordinator. So what that entails as of right now is I'm making connections in the community. I'm gathering patient stories, not just patients with the most common type hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos. Um, I'm making posters and really just talking to people and talking about Stripes and Stride and just, making meaningful connections.
I'm really excited to see where Stripes and Strides goes because it is amazing. Alexa is amazing. Like, shout out Alexa right now. What are some tips that you have of reaching out to your community and finding ways to volunteer or connect in your community?
So I first started volunteering through an equine therapy organization that I was actually being served by at the moment. And then eventually my access needs changed and I couldn't really do that anymore. Because barn work is hard. Farm work is rough. So that was not a thing I could really do anymore. But that did get me involved with a lot of people, and I got involved with a lot of community members and people with various different disabilities and backgrounds. And then from there, I started volunteering at a thrift store. And all of these I found through either my dad or community flyers at the library. That was that was not my favorite job, but the people there were great. I just didn't like sifting through dirty clothes. But then I started with the National Honor Society at my high school. And that's where I really saw a bunch of different opportunities there. Now, I do have a thing with them where I'm like, hey, you shouldn't require volunteer hours to be here because how is someone supposed to get involved with volunteering? So that's kind of an equity barrier that I'm working out with them. But then I started volunteering at my local library. That was awesome. That was awesome. Really seeing people from my community, people I already knew too, and also support your local library. There are so many different opportunities. So really getting involved with your community just is a lot of Googling, a lot of Google Maps. And if all else fails, go to the library.
I love that tip. I actually honestly too want to talk a little bit more about libraries. I also volunteer at my library and I love them. I found a lot of really good public libraries. Not all of them are good. Some of them are underfunded or just don't have enough patrons, but there are some really good libraries that provide so many resources. So, what are some reasons that libraries are important to you?
Libraries are community centers in a lot of different ways. So the libraries that are funded, first of all, can provide a lot of different resources. So I'm actually, without revealing my location, I'm gonna pull
Of
up my
course.
local library so I can get you what they offer.
Yes.
So the public library here, they have Libby. Libby is like Kindle Unlimited, but with your library card, and it's awesome.
Yes.
I would highly recommend. We also have Hoopla, which is where you can rent music, and we have like language learning things. It's really fantastic. So libraries are community centers. Some libraries have hotspots, so people who are unhoused can do things like apply for jobs without being in the library at that moment. Um, and apply for housing and different things. So libraries are very important for that reason. Libraries are also important because literacy is important. So I love the fact that libraries encourage so much literacy and so much reading as they should. And even if it's not through traditional means, I recently volunteered at a Harry Potter party. So they had the books available for checkout, but they didn't even have to check out anything. It was a free event, and kids could go in air conditioned space and get Harry Potter tattoos.
I love.
Yeah.
I love that you labeled them community centers too, because they really are.
Mhm.
Like they
Absolutely.
are so resourceful. A lot of them tend to be accessible to lots of different communities. Like they're amazing. Support your local library.
Yeah. Mine just did a summer reading program,
Yeah.
and there were different prizes you could earn. You get Nats tickets is the local league. So, but it was great.
If there was one thing you wanted people to hear from you, what would it be?
Okay. So, one thing, believe people. I'm gonna go with that. Um, I say that because that really is intersectional. Believe people about their identities, believe people about their experiences, believe people about the way they want to be addressed or the labels they want to use or anything like that. Just believe them, accept it, keep going.
I love that so much. I think on that topic, you mentioned it a while back. Like obviously we're not always going to agree with each other all the time.
Yeah.
What are some ways to have like more respectful debates?
Um, I always go by like, don't insult someone for something like elementary school bullying rules, okay?
Mm.
If they can't change it in 5 seconds, or not even that, because sometimes that's like ideological things, and there's a whole thing with that. However, if don't insult their appearance, don't insult their identity, and just in general, like if it seems like a cheap shot, don't do it. If you didn't put thought into whatever your comeback is, don't say it.
I gotta think before you speak.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
imagine that.
What's like one of the most important things to you in sustaining our communities?
Mutual aid, any day, mutual aid. Because the thing is, if we let people die, we're not gonna have a community.
Mhm.
So really, like, if you're not helping your siblings or your community members or anybody you care and love, or even the people that you might not necessarily like have a vested interest in, but they're a person, help them.
That's an amazing response. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to share today?
um I don't think so, but thank you so much. You
Yes.
are a great interviewer.
Thank you. If you're comfortable, do you want to share how people can find you online?
Absolutely. So my blog is misalignedmilo.com. It's exactly how you think it's spelled. Um, and then you can find me on Instagram if you so please. I also it's also misaligned Milo. And then I'm also on TikTok. And guess what it is? It's misaligned Milo. I know
Play
they all match. I'm so happy about that.
consistent branding.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for doing this interview with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.